I guess World War II was, it was a decent amount of time, but I guess where you guys were basically where you were during that time period.
Yeah.
How old you were, and
What
over
were you
the span
doing?
of it, what
My
were you
God,
doing?
speaking of that, yeah, I've got to figure out how old I was.
Yeah.
Well, you left high school to go
Yeah, in my senior year.
in your senior year, so you were 18.
I guess that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
18 at what, in what year in time?
And,
19?
1940, was it 5 or 6?
I didn't know you, so I don't know.
No, I know.
Well, what was your what?
Well, 1945 was when I was supposed to graduate.
So that's when you left.
Yeah. I left before I
spring.
graduated.
And you left to go where?
Well, I have an unusual, I wanted to go to sea. And so I wanted to get in the Navy. In fact, the Navy was interested in me for the radar,
Radio school.
yeah. Well, no, not radio school. No, more on the.
Did they recruit you in high school? Like, they were looking for people while you were in high school?
I'm not sure what I. Because I think no, I'm not sure.
Had someone else gone? Is that how did you happen to be interested in going?
Well, through a lot of different steps.
Well, the war was on,
The war was still on, yeah.
and everybody
then.
was very hyper.
Yeah, so that was just something that
And-
everybody was doing.
And then, well, anyway, and when I got onto the radio school, and that lasts for almost quite a few months.
I think it'd be best if you would start back why you went to the radio school. You tried to enlist in the Navy.
Well, that's true. I tried to, yeah, and I'm colorblind, and they can't use me.
Because you're colorblind, you couldn't be into it.
Right.
Wow.
Because
Yeah.
they use signal flags,
Oh,
and
right.
so they wouldn't
Yeah.
accept.
But I did the maritime. They liked it. In fact, I went into that and took training there on just training as a maritime sailor.
You've got me confused.
But anyway, then it came up on because of some of the training or exams I gave you. They thought that I would be interested in radio school.
So they kind of suggested that
Yeah.
one way or another.
Yeah, yeah.
And you went from applying to the Navy, being denied into the Navy, and then you went into radio school instead.
Well, yeah, I was in the maritime service.
Sorry, right.
Prior
Yeah.
to that,
Yeah, and then
Yeah, so you went to radio school, and this is the place that was on an island
yeah,
outside of Boston.
it's a great one. Yeah, in the harbor,
Yeah.
and it's outside of the. It was outside of the. Boston Harbor was protected by.
well, there are many islands out of Boston Harbor.
Yeah, but they had a section where they could lock up Boston Harbor that a ship could not get in.
Oh yeah.
And we actually, the radio school was outside of the,
Was it a net?
it was a net.
Because of submarines coming in.
Really?
Yeah.
You had a net all
Yeah,
outside of Boston?
yeah. It was a nice area. So it was, and they'd swing it open and when they needed for our own ships to come and go.
It was Gallup's Island.
Gallup,
Okay.
yeah.
And then, so how long were you on Gallup's doing the radio school? You said just a couple months?
Oh no, it was probably be more like maybe 6 months. It's I can't do it
Wow.
too easy to tell you how long it was, but it was quite a while, and we had classes for a long time, and also then was received training on the what do you call it when you're talking on the radio? It's
Morse code.
Morse code.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we worked on that for a long time. No problem with that. I mean, I got it, and it was fine.
And you always said you liked gallops, right? That was a good time.
Oh my Lord, I had a wonderful time. We had on the weekends we could go back. We could go into Boston, and
Yeah.
And that was big city.
Yeah, right.
yes, it
for-
was.
From,
Oh, yeah, 'cause
from
of course-
Aroostook County.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of course you guys are both from Maine.
And
Where?
this was the war was still going on.
So that had to have been before 1944. The war was over in
45, 46?
45, 46, yeah.
45, yeah.
Officially in 45, I guess. I don't know. Well, so yeah, I should ask that too for the cameras. Where are you guys from in Maine? If you could say both.
Yeah, Holton is my town, town.
I'm from
And you-
Portland,
Yeah,
Portland area.
Yeah.
Both the Portland and Buxton.
Right. And yeah, coming from Holton, which is way northern.
that was way
Yeah.
right.
So yeah, Boston was definitely the big city. Well,
You-
even for
You
Portland.
guys were from Connecticut?
We lived in Connecticut
Oh.
before we moved here.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's where it was. That's
Yeah.
where you guys were connected. Okay.
Yeah.
So you left the radio school after whatever you were done. After you left the
I
radio
really
school.
I really didn't get done. What happened was the end of the European War has stopped, and the Japanese War was still going on, but they closed down the Boston school, and they shipped us down to New York for the same thing, same school, to finish our training.
And in the end, did you finish it?
No,
You didn't.
no, I didn't.
Because you got called in, or why?
Well, the government actually said, "Hey, we don't need any more people on the radio because once the war gets over, normally during the war, 3 operators were on the ship because you had to have the radio operators all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week." That ended up, they didn't need it that way. Now, in my particular case is they said, okay, so you're not going to finish up your training and licensing. Well, I had already passed some of the licensing of the operating, and I did have it. And I had the license to operate. But that was the government, not necessarily the training.
Okay.
Oh Lord. Well, anyway, one of the instructors of the school was still there in New York, and he saw me and he wanted to know what happened, and I told him, and he said, "Well, I'm going to send you down to Panama, and I know the officer down there, and they can hold you, and you've got your license." Even though I didn't really have all the training, I had the license. But he said,
So this is at the very end of the war.
"Oh yes, the
Very end of
war."
You're in New York, and this guy was sending you
And
down.
then I actually, I think when I actually went down to Panama, no, that wasn't quite the end of World War II, but it was damn close. You might as well say World War II ended too. But they said, "We'll hold you when we get there," and he said, "I'm going to hold you until we can get you onto our ship, and when they need an operator on." And fine, that's accepted. But they said, what, as far as they were concerned, but they were wrong. The ship was going to have 3 operators, which is normal during the war. Well, so they took me down. They gave me some clothes that I needed to get on the ship. They took me out on the ship that was anchored in the harbor down there. And they took me out of the ship and put me on the ship. I got on the ship and they started to,
Pull out.
Sail away.
well, they did not pull away quite away. No, not well, yes, they probably were. But they introduced me to all the ship deck and engine room. Well, by that time, and I started to meet some of them, and then I said, well, where are the radio operators? And they said, there's only one, you're it. When they put me on, they said, don't worry about it because they'll help you.
And this is your 18 or 19?
18. And by that time, they pulled anchors and we were heading towards Europe. I was scared to death because of that.
Well, and you ended up getting into some weather, right? You ended up getting into
Well,
some
yes,
weather.
and then so we went across and we didn't have any problem. I was finally I was able to work the radio for all the radio coming in, and I could take the code and do all that. But then I found out that the transmitter didn't work. I think that's why they needed an operator then. In Panama, he got off, and I got on.
So you had an incoming signal, but you had no outgoing signal.
Right,
You
I
couldn't
had
send
no
any-
yeah.
any-
Then the captain said, "Oh, that's fine. We'll do it fine." Well, that was it. But everything went fine, and I was getting messages coming in because I could pick them up,
Yeah.
but I couldn't send anything out.
Well, I thought at one point you had gotten into some weather on that trip too. But
Well, that's where the worst part came. When we were about 500 miles off Spain, we came out into a storm, and I mean, it was a hell of a storm. We lost. We had 4 lifeboats. 4 of them were damaged by the sea.
Thought
And
you lost. I thought you lost them.
well, I guess they were lost. I don't think we. I don't know whether they dumped them or not, but they were smashed up.
yeah.
I want
you're
to
in
pick
that
it up
weather.
again.
Yeah,
But,
you were in that weather.
yeah, I was in the weather, and I was listening to it. I could receive all the information on the storm. Anyway,
At some point, you were looking to send a message out, right?
yeah. Well, yeah, and now at this point too, we had damage to the lifeboats, and then there was some damage to the ship itself. And
The captain must have said something to you.
well, he said eventually he said that well, he was going to send out a message.
Mayday.
Yeah, well, it was a Mayday, and also to let them know that we needed help, and we wanted to know what other ships are around us, in case the ship goes down. And I said, I can't operate the radio to do it.
And this is to the captain.
Yeah, and he said, you better not say much. Yeah,
Can you describe the storm a little bit?
I sure as hell can. The storm, the waves were on that ship. Every wave, we dove into the bottom, as you were going to it, and the ship came over like that, and they had to pull back on the throttle. They had to have somebody on there changing the power on the
Really?
yeah
Just
during
so
the
they didn't dive.
right and get on in there, and that went on. And then, well, there was some damage done to some of the the structure of the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when they're worried. They're worried, and so am I.
And the captain up until that point had no idea that he couldn't send an out.
Oh no, he knew.
Oh.
He knew. Then he put and then in fact he thought he was going to get the information out at that time, and I said no, we can't. I can't get the transmitter to work. And he said, for God's sakes, don't say anything.
I thought he told you to shut yourself in your room and not tell anyone.
Well, yes, at that time,
Yeah.
pretty much. Well, I still had to go down to the dining room and have dinner when they started to feed us.
Oh, because
Again.
he was worried that people were going to be angry at you to get the damn.
I don't know. Well, no, I don't know.
Wow.
But that
So
was
that
it.
was
Well,
awful.
yeah, yes, it was terrible. Well, anyway, just to finish it up on this, we came out of the storm and we came into. Oh, I should be able to tell you the island that I came to, but we came to the south shore of the.
Le Havre?
Hmm?
You came into
It was
Le,
out.
Le Havre?
Well, it was. No, it was no. We were on the English side. We came to the English border, and then they said, "Well, we'll wait until night, I guess, again, and then we'll go over and cross the
Channel?
channel." I guess that was it. Anyway, we pulled into Le Havre. We anchored in Le Havre harbor to waiting for us to get into to unload. And while we were sitting there, a ship right next to us, some explosives came down and sank the ship that was anchored in next to us.
Was this a Liberty
Oh my
ship?
Gosh, wow.
Yeah, no, ours was an English ship.
An English ship?
Yeah.
Whose explosives?
Well, they were
Mines?
floating.
Torpedoes?
They'd been,
Mines.
these were things that were,
Oh.
and they'd been cut up, and then this one was floating. They didn't get it, and it came in, and it sank a ship that was anchored next to us that night. But anyway, we were fine. We went into the harbors of Le Havre, and they tied us up enough so that we could unload some of the ship, and our load was loaded up, overloaded really. So they unloaded about half of the ship, and then what we did, we went up the Le Havre. What's the French river that comes out of Paris? And it goes down to
Seine?
Le Havre.
Seine, yeah.
What?
Le Seine, is that?
The Seine,
Yeah,
is it?
it's-
The Seine?
It's definitely the Seine, yeah. That's
Yeah,
wild.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, they had that. So we went up the Seine River, and I loved it. It was great, scenic going up, and we tied up at. It was the city that. That was the place. Oh,
Is Lyon on the Seine?
I wish I could. I don't have a
Map?
maybe I've got it here.
What? That's the book he wrote quite a few years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
I heard about that, Grandy.
yeah.
Well, don't sweat it.
Well, No, here we go. Oh no, we're not. Anyway, we went up. I'm trying to get up the Seine River.
Yeah, you can get it.
What?
Yeah, you can get it. Yeah.
This is the microphone.
Oh yeah.
What?
Oh,
Whoa.
sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
Here, you can just put it in your.
I can take it.
Okay, yeah, just take it.
Okay, well, I guess that's it.
Hi, Ellie. Did the phone was?
Ah,
Which phone was ringing here?
it's a long time.
Well, but that was most of your war. That was like most of what you did in your participation in the military, right? After that.
Well, yes, except yeah, but they weren't going to dump me.
Meaning
What they did, the captain went to another ship and asked if he could come over, and the other radio operator from them, and see if they could work on it. They did. It took them 3 days to repair that, and then finally we had radio use. I could then send messages out.
Just put it on the couch here. That's fine.
What are you doing?
Yeah, that's great. And so then you guys just went back to
Well,
the States?
not. Well, we were there for quite a while, unloading the ship.
Yeah.
It
With
was.
what? Artillery or?
Oh no! It was fertilizer from South America. See, that's I picked it up. The ship came through Panama, and they'd already loaded it with all the fertilizer, and for the French.
This is a recovery after the war to
Yeah.
get things going. Yeah.
Well, anyway, so we're tied up, and they're unloading the
Fertilizer.
fertilizer. I stayed with the ship. We did get the radio fixed, and I didn't know what they were going to do anyway. But they said, okay, now we can go back to sea again, and when we go back to the States. So we left out, and it was kind of fun. The first message I sent a message to one of the English harbors, and they didn't like me because I was my signal was as strong as I could get, and they were probably within 100 or a mile at the most, and they were going to call the American, to shut your radio down.
Oh, because you were coming in way too loud.
Yeah, well, way too loud. I mean, they couldn't operate.
Which of course is in response to not having any signal at all. You were like.
Well, I did. No, we had a signal then.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
they
you
were
hadn't
doing-
had, yeah.
So we ended from France over to one of the English harbors because they wanted to load it with the.
You took back shad or
I
something?
took back some sort of stuff that they took from the harbor. They needed to get something to hold
Ballast.
the ballast down.
Oh. Okay.
So we spent about 2 weeks, or maybe, well, at least a week, probably two, getting that loaded up for that, which we did.
Yeah.
And then we headed off for the States.
To New York or.
Yeah, to New York. Well, just to make it short. We had a couple of storms, but they were not bad. We lost the they had a
Nope.
yeah, I know.
I'm trying to think of what it would be. You lost something on your ship. during-
Well, yeah, yeah. So,
Stabilizing sail.
well, it was no, it was. Let's forget it.
Yeah.
Forget it.
Yeah. But it wasn't something with the communication. It didn't.
No,
affect your
no.
ship.
In fact, I didn't have any I had very little communication going over, but and we didn't need it. But I finally, before I got over there, though, I sent a message to the U.S. ground radio stations, and I was able to get it. In fact, it was one in Maine that had it, and told them when we were coming in and all that.
Was it Morse code that you communicate with?
Oh,
or
yeah.
So it was all Morse code.
Yeah, and I had it, and the equipment was working. So, yeah, I could use it. And I told them we'd be coming
Coming into
in.
which harbor, though?
New York. We were supposed to come into New York.
But
This is a hell of a time, I'll tell you. So anyway, fine. I got the message out. We came into New York. We tied up right around near the
statue.
statue of, there. We were anchored. The captain and the purser went in town. They came back to the ship, and the purser came up the ladder and he said, "You better go lock yourself up in the room." Anyway, I went up to my room and locked it.
For what reason?
Well, I'll tell you. We got on and it said, we're not going to stay here. We're going to go down overnight down to Baltimore overnight. And we did. And they came in and they said, we weren't supposed to come into New York. Well, they didn't know it and I didn't know it either. But we finally found out when we got into Baltimore, they came out and pointed out that that day that we came into New York, I think all of us,
all the ships,
were not supposed to have come in.
Well, what happened? Yeah.
It didn't get to the ships right.
Oh, it was just a
mess.
mishap.
Yeah.
It wasn't your fault.
So it wasn't my fault. That, in fact, they came up and they said, "Yeah, it's not your fault."
Boy, you just had a bad trip all around.
It was
radio
awful. Well,
so what, in general, though, outside of that experience, what was like, I think for our generation, we have a different understanding of war, but you guys have talked about how that war in particular was everyone's involvement as a country.
Oh, it's so
of course,
unified,
actually,
so
when
patriotic. Yeah.
the trip of ours going over to Europe, the war was over.
Yeah.
We still had the military over there, but that was it.
Well, how about during, and Graham, maybe you can touch on that too. How about during the war, years back, during the war? I mean, what was the country like?
Well, see, I'm 4 years younger than Grampy, so I was 10, 11, but it was. I had a cousin that was in the Navy, and he was on a submarine on the Western Front, and in fact, it was one of the most famous submarines during World War II. It was the USS Tang. It had been very successful, and their last torpedo came around and sunk them.
Their own torpedo.
Their own torpedo came around and sunk them, and caused a fire within the torpedo, and it went down. But they were still alive when it went down, and 9 of them escaped. And I can't remember the term for what they used to get out of to escape a submarine while it was submerged. There's there's something that they can put on, and 9 of them did that and got out, including the captain. But my cousin did not. But I just mentioned that so my family was involved. I mean, that was very tragic. And then my uncle was a colonel in the Army, and he was over and went into Normandy 10 days after D-Day, and he was killed almost instantly. he had been in the National Guard in Maine, and he was 38 years old, and he was drafted. And this is just before the end of the, well no, it's D-Day time, so 1944. So we were very close to what was going on, and even as a 10 and 11-year-old, I was aware of all the hazards and so forth. And my father had been in World War I, and anyway, patriotism was a way of life, and everybody was participating in something, either. I can see my grandfather now, he saved tinfoil, because from his tobacco packs, and he had a ball like this. He'd pound it and make it into a ball, and then that went to the war services. I mean,
the tin, like that was
tin
of some
foil.
value.
Yeah, oh yes, it was used for everything. Was military,
Wow.
and then I can't be sure what years. I was in junior high school, and we were living in Portland in the wintertime, and out 12 miles out in the country in the summer and some winter. Can't really remember that. However, we were asked to house 3 military personnel from the Coast Artillery, all up and down the coast of Maine, and I don't know where else. They had observation towers that were about 50 feet up, and they staffed them, or 24 hours a day with soldiers from the Coast Artillery, and we were asked to have them in our house. And they converted our living room to a barracks. We had 3 bunks in there, and there were 3 privates in the Army living with us. And the post wasn't on our property. It was on a hill nearby, so they had to walk a distance. But they lived with us. They had meals with us. My mother did the laundry.
And some of them, the Titcombs are still in Maine.
One of them married
Yeah.
a girl there. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But it was very exciting for me. I mean, I'm 11 years old, and the Jeep would come up once a week with the sergeant. And actually, his sergeant was Sergeant Titcomb, which is no relation.
Really?
Yeah, no related that we know. But I mean, I didn't know anything about Ralph at that time. But they came out of a base in South Portland and came out to check on the guys at the house. That part of it was interesting. I mean, 2 of them were from New Mexico, and that seemed like miles away. It was a whole different type of person, but they were great.
Was that controversial at all to house soldiers, even
No.
voluntarily?
No, it
It
was very. You felt good about it. You were doing something. Everybody was doing something. It was. You were trying to help. I remember they used to come out. Somebody bussed workers in from this town that I was in, 12 miles out of Portland. They bussed workers in to work in the shipyards in Portland. Don't know much about that. I just can remember them going by the house, and they always were noisy, and they were having a good time.
But in relation to like Vietnam, which you also lived through,
Yeah.
there's big difference.
Oh,
right?
very
There was
big
no-
difference. Yeah, there was.
There was, I mean, obviously it was just as devastating as a war in terms of, I mean, if you count body count, it was just as devastating. But
That
But
was
there was
terrible, but they
not-
didn't have the support. See, that's a political situation that I was too young to be aware of. I just, I don't know. I just remember everybody. Well, and trying to get the news then is so different. They went to the movies to see the newsreel and listen to the radio.
yeah,
We had a bench that we sat on, almost like the front of that bench in front of the radio to listen to the war news, the news. It was,
so what, do you know,
Is
want me
that-
to check who it is here?
I I don't know. It, yeah.
What else was I gonna ask too?
What else? So things we couldn't get things. We had ration books. I still have them. I can remember getting very angry with my father because I wanted cheese, and you were limited to, you know, you could get so much butter, so much cheese. You had coupons to get those, and gas. We had an old tractor, so he got extra gas for that, so we had a big garden, but the rationing was an experience.
Was that ever difficult as far as not getting what you needed to live?
No, never suffered, let's put it that
Okay.
way. Inconvenience,
Right.
annoyance,
Yeah.
but we certainly had everything we needed. But you were aware that things were different, very different. I remember everybody did a lot of sewing for their clothing and so forth, and you couldn't get the fabrics. And they started making grain bags with fabric that could be used. And so I remember having skirts that I made out of grain bag fabric, which of course sounds awful now, but they made some pretty prints, and it was okay. You didn't travel a lot because you didn't have gas enough to do much stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not that anyone would ever wish. I'm moving more and more away from war, but not that anyone would ever wish a war on any society,
No.
but ever. But do you see, like that the positive from that being the unity that the country can achieve around that movement?
I wish you all would experience that.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's a good feeling, everybody's your friend, and you're making do with less, and I never considered it a hardship. It was annoyance. But if your brother's gone, my brother was in the Navy. He was on a minesweeper, and over in the Pacific, and that part was hard. And the communications were so different from what you have now. It would be very hard for you to comprehend what it was like. That you'd write a letter, and when and if they'd ever get it, and then for them to send anything out during the active part of the war, it was unheard of.
Yeah, never was that a common thing too? Like people, I mean, I can't imagine how hard it'd be to deliver letters to the front lines.
That was
they
one.
Often just not get there.
I don't know what happened. Now they showed in the movie last night that we saw, World War I. They did show a truck, an army truck with bags of mail coming, and of course, they were very, very excited over that. But during World War II, I don't really know. I was too young to, put a picture into that. But I do know that we never heard from them. Of course, they never telephoned. That was never heard any from, like, my brother. No.
All right. Now, I don't. Do you have any more questions?
No. So do you want?
Do you have any just more in terms of our generation versus your generation? And, do you have? Well, I mean, like words of wisdom. I mean, you guys have a huge family. I don't know if you can touch upon your large family and watching. You have so many people that you're close to because of your big family, and you can see kind of how different parts of that have developed in different ways. But as you look over all of that, and then you look over your own life, can you talk about any like differences in how society was then versus now? And I don't know, that was kind of a jumbled question. Really.
Well, I understand what you're trying to say, and I'm trying to think of how to respond, but I'm thinking that maybe why I really like to keep our family close. I keep tabs on you. I like to know what and where you are and all that sort of thing. But I think it's so important. It bothers me that you would think today with your communications, your phones and everything, that there would be a more warmth in your general I don't know how to say it, but
It's
I
like
think-
you think we'd be more connected with people because of
There you
what we
go.
have, but
yeah.
it's kind of the opposite sometimes.
And isn't that hard to understand
Yeah.
when you have more means of doing it? Then yeah, I know my mother started me off with having pen pals, wanting me to have a better understanding of someone who lives someplace else. And I had a pen pal in the Japanese internment camp in California.
wow.
Yeah. And I had one in Scotland and one in Australia. And heavens knows what I wrote as I don't know, a 12, 13-year-old, what kind of a letter I wrote. But we corresponded back and forth and at least got a little bit of understanding about another part of the world or what was happening.
How did you get one in the internment camp? Was it a girl your age or a guy your age?
I don't know how she did that, but there must have been something in the newspaper that suggested it or something. We had no inner connections to anything, but it was, yeah. I'm not sure if I still have the letters. I know I gave one away to a collector of the postage stamp because he was very interested in a stamp from the internment camp.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Do you have, so you've got 2 generations of people below you now, and soon to be 3.
Yeah,
Do
exciting.
you have like, do you have some advice for your
Who's
kids?
wait, is there someone?
Yeah, Sophie's pregnant.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, she'll be, and you'll probably see him around James' wedding this year.
Oh cool.
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you have advice first for, you can do it in stages, for your kids? And maybe you can both take a stab at it, see if you have anything smart to say, Grampy. But advice for your kids, advice for your grandkids, and then advice for what would be...
Advice for them.
Oh,
as far-
wow.
And it might be the same, might be different, but if you could... Advice for
Yeah.
your kids.
Yeah.
You know, I know they're way older now.
What you
but
mean?
Yeah.
Advice for them as far as?
I don't
Anything,
know, like
anything.
wisdom, you know?
Yeah.
Oh,
It could be blunt, it could be long.
Yeah.
yeah. You know, when I was in high school, which was during the war, we went in and went once a week. We went into the, what used to be the old, what do you call them? The army. They went off to the war. The local people in charge. Oh, you didn't have it down there, but we had it. We had guns. This has been when we were in high school.
Oh, that was a civilian, not cadet corps, but you were in something
Yeah,
that was
we had.
civilian.
Yeah, I know.
It was early training, local
Yes,
Oh,
it was.
just getting
involvement.
people
He
involved with it.
Yeah.
because he grew up on the border, Canada,
Okay.
and they
Yeah,
they played a trick on them. Or I guess it was a strategy. Should they come and invade your roads, you had a way you were going to stop the cars.
yeah, we did. We set up
I mean, this was
a place where we took. What were the
a rope, a cable.
Well, a cable that they had, and we took it down. It was down at the bottom of a hill, and there was a
This is
pretty
Route
stream
1,
down.
Maine.
Yeah. And so we went up and lined it up so that if the Germans had come in, our job was to go out and straight that stuff at
Across
an
the
angle
road.
on the road, so that if they come down the hill, they're going to hit that, and we're going to shove them into the into the river. That was
It's like a cartoon.
Yeah.
Yes.
which,
Yeah.
which we did some of that. But
Another thing that happened up there that I just have only heard was that before America got into the war,
oh yeah,
there was an airport in Holton,
right in our town, right.
but airplanes could not fly into Canada.
They'd land in Holton,
But
and then
US was
they'd wheel them off the border, and then the Canadians would take it.
and assemble
And
them.
this was before we were not in the war yet, but Roosevelt was trying to get, say,
Equipment
planes
over to Europe.
and stuff. And
So-
so they'd fly them into Holton, and then they pulled them with tractors across the border, and then the Canadians took them.
So it
that
was,
time.
you know, Roosevelt and Churchill worked together
I think
before
I
they.
just heard that on the radio.
Yeah,
this
that-
morning,
Yeah.
actually. They weren't. Roosevelt didn't want to send them.
Right.
He didn't have permission to send
Yeah,
equipment over to Europe yet.
yeah.
And so, but he started in prior to that by
We-
little means like tractors pulling planes across the border.
We had quite an air base at Holton, at the airport there. And in fact, I've done a lot there at that, in there. And we also used it for German,
You housed German prisoners of war there
prisoners of war, yeah, in Holton,
Wow.
and used them on the farms for
on the
labor.
farm. And then also went to some of their dances.
Had a good time.
Yes, we did. That was funny.
No, they were very nice. They
Yeah.
enjoyed them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably happy. To
Oh, they were very
peaceful.
happy. We had them on our farm, German,
Prisoners of war.
yeah, and they came in and worked, and every night went back to the airport.
Well, getting back to the question I wanted to ask earlier, but like
Yeah.
Grampy for you, and I'll ask you, Grampy, you wrote that whole book, right?
I what?
Your life. You wrote that book about your life,
Yeah,
and I'm not done with it yet, but I didn't. It's really interesting because it tells this story that I think. I mean, a lot of people can hardly even relate to because times were so different.
yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, which is what's fascinating about it. That's what's neat. But what's missing, and what I'd like to hear from you is, having written all that and reading it and understanding that, what could you, from all that great experience, what could you tell your kids? Like I said, in terms of life.
I tried to show what we did and how we lived, everything.
Through the Depression was what you.
You know, through that, and
And you did it. Oh, and it comes through really well. But
yeah,
looking back on your life, is there something you could tell? I mean, just like words of advice that you could give.
I don't think so.
Come on.
Well, we were in a horrible, depression at that time.
He was born 1927, so early 30s is what he's remembering as far as the
Yeah.
Depression goes and the lack of
Starts on the
of
right.
everything.
Well, doesn't it ever bother you when you hear people complain nowadays? No, I mean really. Like,
Oh, you mean, oh,
Yeah.
Like young
I mean,
people.
just about
we're
anything.
well, we
So-
complained, they complained back to it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
I think what
With that hindsight, with knowing what you went through, I mean, my life is a lot
Mhm.
different than your life. I mean, I could complain about anything I want, but I don't really have any. I didn't really go through I haven't gone through a real hard time yet.
Mm,
But you still hear me complain, or you'll still hear people in my generation complain. I guess what I'm wondering is, having gone through what you went through, not to say that it was all bad at all, but like,
well, it wasn't too
What-
good.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, what
Oh.
learned advice can you pass on to everybody else who's hopefully got as long to live as you have?
Well, there wasn't a hell of a lot that we couldn't do that we had right there to do with it.
Yeah, I think he really wanted you to see the picture of how you could live with less. And I think now that what bothers me a lot is the waste of our society now, the carelessness of caring for the universe, if you want to be general and big. But we were very sensitive about waste. You didn't. There's so much trash now, so unnecessary. Someone just came in today saying they'd been, I guess they were out in Chicago, and they had to pay 7 cents for a bag, that they're trying to get this through, that the overuse of packaging materials that we have today, for example, is one area of such waste. And if people have to pay for it, maybe it will cut down. But we are wasteful, totally. And caring for plants and animals and the environment, it's the awareness of it is, we have the abilities for the awareness to certainly be there, but I don't know as we all listen.
How do you think that gets missed? You know, the necessity for that. Like, how does that get? Seems like sometimes.
The busyness of today's world, and home life is so busy now, and people working so many, running to this and that, and I don't know, a simpler life.
Well, so I mean, I don't mean to. Not that it was. I had thought of it before, but I kind of did like that idea of you know, if you could break it down by generation, even though the advice I think would generally be the same, but could you think of something like that you'd say to your kids for, you know, a perspective that you could give them, and then what would you say to your grandkids? You know what I mean?
I wish I was a person of words, and I'm not, and I never have been. But I guess it's appreciation for what we have, and caring for it. I not material things as much as the natural things. It's we have a beautiful natural world, but it needs our attention. We're too careless with so much. We have so much. A simpler life.
What do you mean by that? Just slowing everything down? Right?
Yeah. That, certainly, I do worry about this, not your generation, but your younger, I'm thinking of the younger kids and all of their electronics and the constant game playing and all of that. Where's that going? It's a distortion of the mind as far as I'm concerned. It's not realistic. It's not the real world. And maybe it's because I'm not technically talented or have an interest in it, but I just am missing so much to me as far as I'm concerned. And
I think so much has changed from what we had then. We don't have it anymore. I mean, there were things that we had. There were local orchestras, and we had houses. They had. We had Saturday nights. They had orchestra.
the Grange Hall.
Yeah,
the
Grange Hall, or another one.
More community oriented.
Yeah.
Just out of necessity. If you wanted to be social, it meant being social with your neighbors.
And there was a lot of that. We had it all over the place.
Well, you supported each other that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like people are really like, they try and nowadays we wear our emotions on our cuffs or whatever. You know, like we try and be very. I think that's like a mantra, is that people are looking to prove that they can show their emotion or share their emotion, and it sounds like, you know, maybe more so with you guys. I mean, I feel like you're a little bit, your generation can maybe be a little bit colder in terms of showing a lot of emotion.
I wouldn't use cold, I'd use reserved.
Sure, yeah,
Yeah.
reserved.
Yeah.
But in contrast, what's interesting is it's not. I mean, I'm saying about my generation. I think it's a little bit fake. It can be fake. Whereas with you guys, you had a real thing of your neighbors were people that you had to rely on, and therefore you socialized. And I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you're more reserved about your emotions than people are today. But what's why?
I don't know, but I family stayed closer, I think, than now.
Well, the telephone up in there, when we were there, we were up in the phone, and you
Oh, party line.
party. I know it was it. Oh, jeez. We had a lot with the phone. Lord Frost, that I grew up with, and we used to like to see. It was all done on party lines.
So
It
you could
wasn't-
listen in to
you
other
can't-
people.
Oh, really?
You don't pick up and just dial the number.
How many were on
You
your
just
part?
lift it up, and then you try to ring out for someone coming on. So, and all you had to do is, we probably had about 20 families that were using one phone number that we,
One line.
yeah, and oh,
We had the crank phone, so everybody had a different crank. My crank was 22, too long and too short.
yeah.
But you could listen in to other people on the line.
Yeah, oh yeah, we
just
was
pick
a
it up.
ball.
And I remember he said something about one neighbor had canaries.
Yes.
So they could tell when she was listening on the line because they heard the
We could
canaries. in
hear,
it.
we could hear her canaries. We'd tell her to shut them up. and she'd slam the phone down.
Well, but I guess that's what I have I'm really bad at articulating what I want to try and get out of it. But like even that experience of like you're sharing this party line, which to us, I mean, I can't imagine anybody standing for something
Yeah.
like that. I mean,
Yeah.
we share a lot of stuff in a different way with all our social media,
Yeah.
and we try and have this. It's almost like a facade of here's everything about my life, but in a really real way. If you wanted to communicate something serious,
Yeah.
it might be over a party line.
Yeah.
What we did too over the Saturday night is let's say a house gets on fire or a barn gets on fire, and you just open the phone up and then just ring, and you get the phone, so everybody knows something's gone wrong.
Huh.
So then they give them the news.
There's a fire.
Just when
Everybody
we got
goes.
a fire down at Jake's house down there.
And everybody goes
Yeah.
to help. Yeah.
They sure did. Oh God. Oh gee, it was a great world.
I'm getting low.
Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah,
About
you
that
know.
anyway, but
I did work at the Army hospital down in Maryland when Ralph was in the Army. That was the Korean War. No, yeah, Korean
Yeah.
War. And we had a lot of Korean War brides. I was working in maternity. We had a lot of Korean War brides
Oh, I
come
guess they
in
did.
and have their babies at the Army hospital. It was fun and interesting to meet them. And, yeah.
these are brides, the Koreans that came back with.
They married,
And
yeah,
their husbands were.
stationed at
And
Fort
so,
Meade.
and then when they
okay.
came back, their wives all had babies, and that's Nancy was at the hospital, and all these babies coming out.
And what were you trying to say about that though? It's just interesting in general. Or,
Well, it was an experience, and I saw our Army doctors who had been drafted into the Army, and they were not happy to leave their practice and be put into the Army, and then,
And they were doing some cases that they're not really qualified.
well, right,
Yeah.
anyway, it was just another touch of a war. That
well, that was great. Any final Any final words?
No, there's so much.
I know there's so much. It's so hard, but
Yeah.
you guys, that's. I mean, that's what's important though. Is just getting
Yeah.
some of it down. I think, we appreciate that.
And we remember the wonderful celebration at the end of the war. It was in Portland, and how the whole city turned out, and it was just wonderful. It was exciting. You know, I think the now when you see footage of the war, you know what's going to end. You know what happened. But living through when we didn't know, it was a very uncertain feeling. So families were close, stayed close, and did what they could. Most everybody found something that was helpful to support the war.
Yeah.